Hi, my name's Jeff Rhodes, and welcome to another video about, normally it's Office 365. In this case, it's going to be about Excel and automation of Excel using .NET Windows Forms. So, as you might have noticed if you've been watching some of my past videos, I switched over from the Air Force Academy to the Office of Personnel Management a couple months ago, and I've really enjoyed that. But had a challenge last week about some data where we basically have a system where we're trying to export data, and there's a directory with hundreds and thousands of attachments on the server. But when we to try to get our hands on, we basically need to archive this data, and we've got an Excel spreadsheet, or even if it goes in the database, it has, you know, the name of the file, but then the system goes and shortens it on the directory, and how do we get and actually find and get the file. So I thought that was a good use of a new utility. So anyway, there's a picture of my book in case you're interested in the Office 365 side, but let me show you the challenge. So here's just a notepad. Some of the data, even though nothing I show in here is sensitive, but I didn't want to use anybody's name or anything. So this is basically how it ends up looking. So you've got, when you open the Excel file, you've got some HTML that comes over, and then this part here is the name of the file. So that's not too bad, but there can be multiple files. So in any event, I did an Excel, first thought was to just use Excel to go ahead and do it. And with some, they don't have a split function, but you can do like the search and the LEN function and the left and the right and the mid and stuff to get that's fairly straightforward. And then here's one that's got multiple files. So notice this part here is the first file, and then there's more HTML, and they put a second file. And even that we could put in Excel, but if there's an unknown number of files, we really just need a while loop and can't really do that in Excel. And then finally, unbelievable, you actually can put commas and stuff in the names of the files, which you wouldn't expect it. So that's kind of a drag. So you've got this kind of situation, and basically in the app, that, as we'll see in a second, if we only have one of those, we'll do it. If we have multiple ones, then there's really no way without an extension to kind of distinguish some of this data from the file itself. So that one's like an air condition, and you'll see I put some logic in to kind of map out how to, so we can tell if it worked or not. So, all right, let's go over to Visual Studio. So I'm a old school Windows Forms guy, and I know somebody watching this video probably like, you should have used WPF and things, and good criticism, but I find it, even though I've done some WPF and everything, I find it most convenient and easiest for me to do the Windows Form. So that's what we got here. So you can see the app here. I won't bore you with the details, but let's just run it, and then I wanted to kind of go through some code in case it would be useful to somebody else. So what I've done is I've got the Excel file, and I've got the My Settings, which we'll see in a minute, which kind of remembers what to do. So it's actually, this particular file is like almost 9,000 rows, but let me just do like the first 500. And then I'm going to have a source and a destination. So let's just run it so you can see what it does. And so what I'm using is automation, and I'm getting the name of the HTML, or that HTML here, and then I'm stripping just the names of it. And if it's got multiple files, I put like some pipes in there to make it easier to split on. And then the parent logic is that if it's longer than 37 characters, it just strips out the rest of it and puts like this $_ in there. And then I put some columns in. We'll see later that this kind of works and kind of doesn't. Seems to be a little bit of weirdness on these columns for to check them off. But I go ahead and add those so we can keep track of them later. So, and what I'm doing is making a data table and going through. So I've got a little directory. Let me shift over. So I put just a few files in for testing. So there's the source files, and then I've got a destination directory that's blank. So the idea is you can come over here and choose that directory, and kind of scroll down there and choose one, and then you can copy it, and then I separately made one that will delete it. So let's copy it first, and you'll see some of this has some bad data. So you'll see I did a try catch and just kind of show the files that are just, give basically an invalid file name or path characters in the file name. So I copy them over, and so it says, okay, there's one that just for whatever reason had HTTP in there and it's not a valid file name. And then so it, like I said, it kind of worked, kind of didn't. So we had a couple here that, and then if it found it with the original name, it does it over there. So a little bit of weirdness there, but that's okay. But you can see over in the destination now, all those got copied and they're still in the source. So that's most likely, but I thought, well, I might as well also give the ability to delete it in case we really just want to clean that up after we've taken all these ones out. So that's here. So it has a special message. Are you sure you want to delete it? If you say yes, then it does now. It gives again that error and puts some deleted things in there. And then if you go back and look at source, you see now it's empty. So that's the idea of the app. So basically I want to spend the rest of the video just kind of showing you if you haven't done Excel automation on there. So this is, I'm a VB guy, so you obviously do it in C# as well. So first thing I did is go in and add a reference to Excel. And the way you do that is you come here and you say add, and you go to com, and you type in Excel, and you see I've got that checked. And when it did that, it brought the Office DLL as well. So that's how you got those two. So literally it's just out of the box except for those. Next thing you do is you go, I went ahead and imported that namespace. And I like to do, see I could have done interop dot and then done Excel, but it's actually, you'll see in the code, it's a little easier because then you're trying to do like Excel dot application, and you can tell it's really Excel. If you went all the way to Excel, it would just say as application, and then you're kind of wondering, well, what kind of application is it? So I've got some private variables, but these are global to the form. And so you can see this attachments table's huge. That's the one I use to bind the grid to. And then I'm not 100% sure on this 37 characters, so I want to make that a constant. And then this is what I use later. If I've got multiple attachments associated with a particular row of Excel, I just separate it with those pipes. And what you want for, if I actually first did it as a carriage return live feed, but I had some weirdness, so I decided to just do the 5 pipes. And you want to pick something that's not going to show up in the data, and that's a pretty safe bet. So one thing I like, and it's kind of interesting, another thing that I did is I first did it on my work machine, and I only had the .NET 5 runtime, and this all worked fine, but it didn't, my settings is not all sorted out there yet. So that was kind of a downer, because this is a nice way. If you haven't done it, what basically happens, I'll go back to the properties again, and you'll notice, by the way, see how I redid this in .NET 4.5 because I wanted to make it older. Plus, I want to be sure, I haven't tried this yet, but when we put it over to the server, I don't want to be installing stuff on the server, of course. So I want to find kind of a little bit older framework to make sure it's already there on the server. And what we'll basically do is make a copy of that attachments directory, move it to the dev environment, run the utility on it, and do it there. And really just to get all the files, that's going to be adequate, but we don't want to be installing .NET frameworks on a server if we can avoid it at all. So anyway, on the settings, you can come in and just add stuff that you want to save. So you'll see these are all the things from my form. So it's just kind of a nice way where you can go ahead and save what they do, and then when they start the form up again, it has it. So basically that's what here. So we say, okay, if my.settings.source file is nothing, then I go ahead and set, this is my path. So that's this guy. You can kind of see over here, Excel file path. So that's how I started up with whatever I saved it from the last time. So we'll see that. So that's all we're doing on the load. Now on the browse button, so if I double click this, you'll do the same. So this is pretty standard functionality. We're just doing open file dialog. So you can look this up really easily online. So basically that all is open the file dialog. If it's already done, you kind of set it up with whatever's already typed in there so they don't start off in a new directory. And then if they say okay, then we update the text box with it on there. So that's pretty straightforward. All right, so what are we going to do? Let's go back to the form. So we also, the way I wanted to do it, there's a couple ways, but you basically, when you're automating Excel, you want to set up a range. And I thought it was easiest just to give it the column number, the row number, and the ending row. And you see it's anywhere, I could go to 9,000. I just did it for like 500. But you tell it basically, because in this case, I have a particular column that I know where the data is, and it turns out to be column 56. But we're going to use this utility on a lot of different exports of Excel, so it'll vary each time. So let's go, probably the easiest way from here is let's run it in debug mode. So let's go ahead and I'll assume that, that we've done. So I've got some error checking here. So if they hit the load grid button, then we don't, we make sure that they've set all the values before we do it. And then if the attachments table already exists, so we've already run it once, we just tell them, are you sure you're going to reset this table? Make sure that they're just clicking it by accident. We don't just overwrite it without asking. And then I'll put a breakpoint here and we'll run through it. So this is where we actually get to the fun stuff, where we actually talk to our Excel file. So let's run it again. So you can see where we defaulted, that was all that my settings stuff. I hit the load grid. This attachments table didn't do it already. I've already got my locals variable down here. So I'm just going to step line by line. And it's kind of fun. If you want to, you can go see if we can see the Excel app ID. So you can kind of tell right there it's working. So it's that interrupt Excel. And then we're going to open the workbook, and you can see the XLSX file that I put in there. So it takes a second. And then I'm grabbing the worksheet. Now you can give it a name here. I didn't want to, I could have put sheet 1, but I wanted it still to work even if somebody renamed that sheet. So I just want the first one. I'm not going to mess with going to separate ones, but you can see if I scroll down to the worksheet, it's found that it's a worksheet. And then now this list, so this is basically an array. So I like to use that to store everything I've got. So I've got a list of string, and you'll see that I basically wanted to go use the original name and then also store the shortened name. And I'm going to try both of them to find it, because it doesn't seem to be totally consistent about whether it shortens it or not. So that's what that attachments list is. And then I'm just reading my values. You can see I got the column number and the row, starting row and the ending row. And then I'm going to read it cell by cell, but even though it's one cell, it's still of type range, excel.range. And then I'm going to go ahead and update my settings values here and save it. So the minute I click it, I go ahead, in case they exit now, I've saved it, and it puts it in a little config file. So now I'm going to loop through and notice, so I've got my cell here, and it's a range. And now, it's kind of fun. This way, if you get your debugger, you can do a lot and kind of say, okay, here, notice how I can see the text. So I can be sure I'm on, when you're first trying to get the column number right and so forth, you may be on the wrong column. So you can see that HTML I was talking about. So I can tell I've got it right, and I can look at some other ones. And so all I'm doing here is I'm just going to add that list, a generic list is what they call it, and I'm just going to add all the text. So I basically go through it 500 times or 9,000, whichever one I'm doing it, and then I check to see if I've added anything, because it could be that everything's blank and they don't have any. And you see I have a debug there, so I'm just going to hit F5 and continue. So how many did I got? Well, I got 494 of them, and that's because I sorted this spreadsheet with all the attachments at the top, so that's why almost all of them are there. And so what am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to make a new table. So think of an Access database or another kind of database. I'm just doing it all in memory. There's various ways to do it, but I like to do it because I can update the table and then just bind it to that list. And then that's how it shows up. So hit the right one. And so what I'm going to do is add all those columns. So you see I put an HTML, the original HTML, the attachment name shorted, and then a bunch of Boolean things. Like I said, I got a little bit of weirdness, but it's close enough. It certainly does the job. So now I'm going to do a for each. Again, I've got that 494 things, and I can actually look, and you can kind of see each one in there, okay? So I'm going to make a new row, and then I'm just going to grab whatever's in there and put it in the attachment row. And then for the array, I kind of did by that. So I did another array, because what happens is I want to go ahead and do my processing, and it makes sense to go ahead and grab the full name and grab the shortened name at the same time. So I'm basically going to bring an array of 2 items. The first one's going to have the full name, and then if it's longer than 37 characters, I'm going to bring back the shortened name as well. So let's go jump into that. I'll hit the F8 key. So I'm passing in, you can see all on my HTML. And this is where, when I was talking about the Excel earlier, where Excel doesn't really have a split command. You can do some of that, but we need basically to do a while loop, and we need to split. And so really this is where .NET comes in. So it's nice. So you see I did an HTML array. So let's look at that. So notice what I did. I split on that semicolon. And so I got rid of all the HTML that I didn't want in the first one, and I've got my file name already there. So pretty straightforward, because this one only has one file name. And so now I'm doing some texting, some tests. So I'm making sure it's not blank, and I'm also doing this. And this has to do with trying to distinguish on some of these to get rid of the HTML, and because I should come back. Let's go back to the thing for a minute. So notice in this, so the example we're on is like this one, so it's going to work fine. We're just going to grab that. And same with this. So, but this guy, if I just look for a dot here, notice it doesn't have an extension, but it doesn't have any HTML, and so it's going to go. It's this guy, because what happens when I split here, the second record ends up being all that I've got highlighted there. Let me scroll it a little bit, and it'll be a little easier to see. Yeah, so everything I've got highlighted there will be in there. And so I need to get some more data. I don't want to just try all that, because all this font color and everything's not part of the file name. So I got to do a little bit more on it. So that's what's going on here. So I want it to not be null, and either it's got a dot in it or it doesn't have that in. Okay, so either one. Now if it doesn't have a dot and it's got that in it, then we're just going to blow it off, because we can't really deal with it. and we'll have to pick it up as an error condition. All right, so we come in here, and now I've got another function where I'm going to format it, okay? So again, this is one where I'm going to bring back two things. I'm going to bring back the full name and the shortened name. And this next logic is really trying to deal, let's go back to Notepad, that's trying to get this guy out of here. So what I'm basically going to do, if it's got a dot in it, if I get anything, it always has a comma after. So if I get anything after the comma, then I'm just going to blow off the whole rest of this, because I'm going to basically delete all of that. So in this case, so I'm looking for the dot num, and then I'm looking for a comma starting after the dot, and if I have it. So I'll put a breakpoint so we can see that case later as I'm going through. I don't have it now. Then I'm trimming just in case it got any spaces, and then I'm checking the length. In this case it's 39, so I'm gonna put this on the first and just grab a substring of it, and it's the 37. So I'm gonna just pull off the last 37 characters, and then I'm gonna add to the shortened. So if I look at this list, I actually have two. I have the full thing and I have the shortened one. All right, and I come back, and then I'm using another one, which in .NET is called a string builder. It's just a way to build a string fairly easily. So again, I'll put a breakpoint in if I ever need to split it. In this case, I'm just going to append it to our string builder, so it's just got that in there. But I build that if I have multiple attachments all in one record. And then I do the same thing on the shortened list. So what am I bringing back? In this case, whoops, the long one and the short one. All right, so let's keep going. And I check its count if I put it, and then I set everything else to false, and I add the row. So I do that for all the ones. So let me hit F5. Now I've got one where it's longer. So you can see this is that case that we talked about. And notice what's coming through. So it's got, the HTML has all that stuff after the comma. So that's why we're going to figure out, and I'm going to take a subscreen, and I'm basically going to pull off only everything up to the comma. So the HTML, after I do this one, now you'll see I've pulled off just the PDF file. And then that's what's coming up here. So I've got this SB full name. I already had a previous one that was okay, and now I'm going to put another one in there. So now I've got the pipes in there. So see how I've got two different ones. So that's basically this situation. Again, I pulled that off, and I've thrown in both of those together. All right. So don't need to do that anymore. And we've built all that. So let's go back and see if there's anything interesting in there. Oh, so let's go back to our all right, so we loaded all that. Oh yeah, so I didn't have it, so then we just, it's pretty easy to put it in that grid. Notice I just put the grid on there, and I didn't you know, all I have to do is say .data source and it is equal to the table. And then to close it off, I close the workbook and quit. So let's go back and look. By the way, one thing that's kind of nice on an app like this is I put the anchor on there. And watch what's nice, because see how I can get it bigger and push it down, and the thing just grows with it. So to do that, let me go back to Visual Studio. Let's see, I should be able to do it while it's open. So if you look at the that a little bit bigger. Where'd my anchor go? Oh, yeah, there we go. So So you anchor it on all sides. And then like this one, the anchor is so that when it goes to the right, that one stays to the right. You can get up and right, and then all the rest are up and left. So as you move it around, it all works well. But that's kind of nice. If you've got a big monitor, you can just get it really wide and make those columns bigger and so forth. All right, let's go to look at the copy then. So that's about the last interesting part in here. So it turns out on the, so here's the directory browsing where I'm doing the source and the destination. See, it's a slightly different dialog. Instead of the open file one, it's the folder browse, but it's the same kind of idea. Notice I'm putting my settings and saving it there because that's the time they do it. All right, so let's do the copy. So I had this all in one function, but I decided to split it out because I end up needing to do it. It's easier to do it twice. Once for the attachments, a full name, and the other one for the shortened name. It's kind of unwieldy because I've got multiple attachments in one. It's hard to go through and do both sets at once, so it's just easier to call the same function twice. So since I had a fair amount of code there, I didn't want to duplicate it, so I just put some parameters in. So you might find that interesting. So let's go ahead and say copy attachments. And so what I'm passing is basically my query. So I've got how I'm gonna put a breakdown here so I can see doing it again. So how I'm gonna query what we call a data view. So I'm gonna only look for ones that have an attachment name that's not null. I don't need to go through and look for ones that don't have attachments in the first place. And then these are my column names I'm going to use. I'm going to read from the attachment name, and then I'm going to update found attachment and copied attachment. So let's go in there. And so, again, a lot of database kind of stuff, but this is a data view, which is basically like a query. It's a filtered one, so you make it a default view to start. And then I've got a bunch of variables here. And then I filter it. So there's my filter string. And then my count now is that 494. Remember that from before. Okay? And then I can do a for each. So I'm basically going to get row by row. And then I get my hands on the attachment string. So notice how it was there before. And then I'm going to split it. Now the split's not going to work because it's on that pipe, but when we got the one with the multiple ones, then it will go through each one, and then we'll do a for each again. So that's if I have 10 attachments on one record, it'll just, you do them all. All right, so I'm going to go, if the file name's not blank, now then I'm going to build the path. Okay, so there's that source directory text. So I'm going to build the path. Now this is where that try catch comes in, because some of those, like I said, it had a http:// as the path, and that's not valid. So this will error. So that's we have a try, and then if you go down to a catch, so I've got that's what I'm returning as one of these string builders, and it'll just list everything that was an error without stopping the operation, because we want it to continue. If it's got 3 of them with errors, we want the other 491 to work. So to do this, again, a couple ways to do it. I like the file info class. So to do the file info, if we go all the way to the top, you'll see I imported another namespace, system.io. And the system.txt is what you use for the string builder, by the way. So we build a new file info. So if we go look at that, it's got a bunch of things. It's got its directory, and it's got an exist function. Notice it's going to be false, and we're going to be checking if it's true, because that file doesn't actually exist. And then it's got some other things that we can do. It's got some methods and so forth. So it's going to just go on to the next one. So let's put a breakpoint for when it does exist. Oh, looks like it didn't find any that there, but now I'm going to call it again. And notice this is the same. So I'm going to say, we're going to look for the attachment's name shortened's not null, and also found attachment is false, so that if the previous one set found attachments to true, so if it already found it, no sense trying to find the shortened version of the same file. And then we're going to change the names of the columns. So we're going to look for attachments name shortened, and then we're going to update those two columns. So I'm going to hit it there. Oh, and it looked like it didn't find any, so that wasn't the greatest example. So let's go ahead and do a longer example. Let's go down to 9,000. This is, you'll see it'll say reset all our attachments, and we'll skip that. There we go. Looks like it did it. Oh, it's still working on it, so we'll have to wait till it's all the way done, because it takes a second reading that Excel spreadsheet. And I probably should have put a alert when it was finished, but I didn't do it. So oh, there it goes, because I did have a breakpoint in there. So we'll keep going. Okay, so let's try it again. So now we're gonna let me make sure my source directory. Oh, you know what the problem was? Not that, it's that I showed you earlier how I deleted from my source. So now there's nothing in it, so it didn't find anything in there. So let me copy everything back to the source. And I've set it up that it would overwrite on the destination. So that's why we didn't do it, but that's all right. Let's go through, hit F5 on that one. All right, there's one where it exists. So it found the column name, and then we build the destination path. So notice that's to my destination. And then this file info has a copy to function, and then this true means to overwrite. You can either do true or false. You want to overwrite the file. And then after I do it, I do another file info, and we're basically just seeing if it's there or not. And if it exists, then we update that it copied it. So that's a way to kind of error check that it got it. Okay, so we'll get rid of those. And it gives us ones that had some errors. So that one's there, and something bad, this colon. Oh, so this one is an example, one that just didn't have a right kind of format. And so we got that ampersand MBSP in there, so it couldn't figure it out. I'm not sure what was wrong with this one too. So we would go make a screen capture and go find those ones. And then we do it again with that one. Let's see if it had any. So it's got another one that it didn't like, and that's it. All right, almost done. I know it's a long video. Let's go look at the delete. So the delete's basically same. We got to delete on both, so I'll put a breakpoint in on just the first one, and we'll go in and delete them. Are we sure? Yes. So it's exactly the same format. So I just go down here and literally just start when we find the file. So now we found the source file. We go ahead and update it that we found it. And then this file info just has a delete function. So we just literally call delete and say that we found the deletion. So you see how it did all those. And it tells us the ones that were invalid again. Delete a couple more. And if we go back to the source, it's empty again. So, all right, I think that's it. Let me stop debugging, see if there's anything inside. No, that's the end of our thing. So hopefully that found useful. It's about 35 minutes, so only the true diehards will find that of use. But hopefully there's some Windows Forms people who need to do some Excel automation that this will help. Have a great day.